fantastic opening remarks for this session. I'm delighted to be welcoming Tonny Kukeera next to come and give us a presentation. Tonny is working on his DPhil degree at the Smith School of Entrepreneurship and Environment. He investigates sustainable pathways for delivering affordable electricity in low-income countries for rural economic development. Previously, Tonny has worked with regions of Climate Action, Low Carbon Energy Development Network, the National University of Lesotho, and MicroEnergy International in the area of international development, climate change, mitigation, energy and environment. I'm delighted to welcome Tonny and invite you all to welcome Tonny to the stage.
Thank you for the introduction. Good morning, everyone. So when I was going through the list of all the speakers, I noticed the only person who is not a professor. Which is kind of, too much pressure, but also exciting. I'm glad I'm here. Yeah? So my work, as the earlier speaker mentioned, my work is about how do we deliver affordable electricity in low-income countries. I'll start with this. I'll be a little bit futuristic. I'll start with this robot. If you haven't noticed, these are the hands, and then it has these legs. But the idea is to show that electricity or access to affordable electricity is connected to all the SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals. And when you look at this robot we have, the heart, if you don't connect that heart to electricity, this robot cannot move. But then this robot to move, once you connect electricity, then you're able to, provide good health, eradicate poverty, zero hunger, access to water, climate action, and the rest. Now, it's important to note that there are two ways of providing electricity. There is the grid electrification pathway, which is the traditional way of providing electricity. What happens in this case is you see large distribution lines traversing geographies to extend electricity to households and communities. Now, the challenges with this is it's expensive, and for some regions in the developing countries, it's not economically feasible. That brings me to this off-grid electrification pathway. Now, there are different ways of how electricity is provided through the off-grid. You have the solar home systems, you have the solar appliances. These target individual households, but on the other hand, you have small grids. These are called mini grids that target communities of 100 people and above. Now, due to the population densities in different regions, regions in Africa, it's important then to focus on this off-grid electrification because, first of all, it provides affordable electricity, it's highly decentralized, and it's customizable to meet different user needs. On this map, I'm trying to show you how much coverage we have for the grid lines and how it might be very difficult or even next to impossible to see Africa achieving universal electricity access in the next decade. The blue lines, the thick blue lines, those are the existing high voltage lines which extend electricity to different locations. And now the dotted ones are the planned lines, high voltage lines, and then the rest, it's either mini grid, standalone, or nothing. This still emphasizes the point that indeed the off-grid electrification pathway is the most feasible pathway to achieve universal electricity access. In fact, the African Union has considered off-grid electrification in the Agenda 2063, which promises to transform Africa into the global powerhouse. Some countries like Uganda, Kenya and Rwanda have considered the off-grid electrification pathway as a significant part of their future electrification plans. Now, it's exciting because in the last decade, we've seen increase in access to electricity, and much of this has been attributed to off-grid, especially because there are all these different innovations that are being led by, predominantly the private sector, but in hand with the other actors within the energy sectors. I would like to focus your attention on the image on the left. That's fish, as you can all see. So what happens here is this off-grid company set up a mini-grid in a fishing community, but it had to go beyond providing electricity to provide ice that is used by the fishermen to preserve their fish. So these kinds of innovation provide a glimpse into what can happen if indeed there is so much support for the off-grid sector to meet the needs of the communities. In the second picture, we see a cold storage being provided for this group of farmers in a rural community in Nigeria so that they can be able to preserve their produce. But there are also a lot of challenges that are facing the sector. Top on that is the complexity of policy environments. So the earlier policies or the policy environments that are existing at the moment cannot support the off-grid sector to go forward. For example, when you go to some of the countries, let's say Uganda, you find that, well, the policies are before focused on grids. So if you look at the equipment or the rules about importing things like wires or poles, they only apply to the grids, and this in a way constrains the development of the off-grid sector. The other part is there is a continued pursuit of electricity access in isolation from other development goals. For example, there is no way you can think about the vision of providing health services that meet everyone in the country without bringing the energy sector on the table. If you're thinking about providing agriculture that is going to meet the needs of your population or the food needs of your population, then you need to have the energy sector on the table because you need it to provide the water that is going to be required for irrigation and things like that. So in this field, we advocate for having different ministries on the same table when governments are trying to, discuss the way forward for their countries. And then lastly, this focuses on the developers that are involved in the electrification of communities. Since it's a nascent technology, there's a need to understand what kind of business models can apply to deliver, to make it work. What can make it sustainable? Who do you need? And what do you need them for? So some of the work we are doing here is, recently we were looking at how can the off-grid electrification sector support communities to be resilient. For example, during the pandemic, how do you ensure that much as you have all these disruptions, how do you ensure that people can still access food, can still be able to have electricity and still access health? So this is a picture I took from one of the islands where there is a mini-grid that provides electricity. And this is a maize milling station, the rest. So the other work we are doing is how do you ensure that the decisions of these different actors within the energy sector are well aligned to deliver financially viable electricity. So we look at the development partners, the government, the communities, and the private companies involved in electrification. And then I thought I would put this slide to show you how the real thing looks like. So here I was in one of the communities in northern Uganda. What you see there is the internet center, computer center, where people can go and access the internet, learn about things like that. This is one of the businesses, and this is the electric vehicle that the community uses to transport agricultural produces to the milling station. Here, it was just in time for the World Cup. This is the local cinema hall, and England was playing against Iran. Unfortunately, it never came home. It never came home, but at least people were there to watch the game. Thank you for listening.